Welcome to a fresh take on the news, putting you at the centre of the national conversation about the issues that matter to you most. Tonight, war continues to rage in Europe as Russia bombards Ukraine. More than 1 million people have fled the country, civilians are under fire, and there are international calls for China to intervene. I'm Trevor Phillips, and this is The Great Debate. Each week, we go to the heart of the issue dominating the headlines. Tonight, as we continue the conversation about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, our viewers panel from across the country and across the world will have their say, they'll tell their stories, and they'll hold our studio panel to account. Joining us this week, Bill Browder, businessman, head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign, co-founder of the Institute for Strategic Dialogue and expert in disinformation, Sasha Havlicek, the former Foreign Office Minister, Alistair Burt, Sophia Gaston, director of the British Foreign Policy Group, and joining us from Westminster for the first part of the show, before he returns to commitments in the Commons, the Conservative MP and military veteran, Bob Seeley. All here to answer the question, can the West stop Vladimir Putin? Sasha Havlicek, our fault.
Well, this is the thing. I think we have made a number of mistakes, but I don't think those are the mistakes. Putin has repeatedly tested Western resolve to see how far he could go the next time round. From the invasion of Georgia to Crimea, of course. This war in Ukraine isn't actually new. To the war in Syria, where he perpetrated war crimes that went entirely unanswered by the international community. Those red lines that have been crossed and crossed again. We had opportunities to push back, to start with sanctions earlier on that would have degraded his capabilities to get further and further and further. We had opportunities to start to really have an impact on his propaganda machinery, domestically, globally. We haven't done that until now. We've only just started to have measures taken in that regard. So we've made a lot of mistakes, and it isn't so unbelievable that Putin would assume that there would be very little pushback from NATO, from the EU, from the transatlantic alliance, because there hasn't been to date. So what I would say is, we need to have the resolve now. And I do think that we're seeing some really quite seismic changes in response. We've seen the EU come to the table, offer weaponry in record time. We've seen a complete 180-degree turnaround in German foreign policy. They're investing in their military.
Yeah, the Germans are going to put 100 billion, I think.
Huge, 100 billion. And this is a massive departure in terms of their own foreign policy since the end of the war, the Second World War. We are starting, we see the EU now offer Ukraine membership of the EU, start to use enlargement as an actual tool of influence again in the neighbourhood. So there are some seeds for hope if we can sustain it. Now, that's the other question.
Well, we'll come to that. Welcome back to The Great Debate. Can the West stop Vladimir Putin? The images played around the world of the Ukraine invasion often show horribly familiar scenes. Men conscripted to fight, tanks rolling in and gunfire and shelling hitting towns and cities. But this war is being fought on another front too. The information battle is raging online as both sides tell their own version of events. Clive Eshelman, you're in Accra. I think you're watching this and you've got a view about the information war. Clive.
Yes. Thank you very much. I like the point that Sasha raised about her dialogue. My question is, who is controlling the propaganda about the Russian invasion, and what is the end game?
Thank you, Clive. So Clive's got a straightforward question for our panel. Who is controlling propaganda about the Russian invasion, and what is the end game? Sasha, what do you think?
the Russians have seen information as a central pillar of their domestic and foreign policy for always. And they've invested really heavily in building out an infrastructure for information operations around the world that combines effective state media, which is essentially an extension of the Kremlin's foreign policy arsenal, so RT, Sputnik. It combines that with all sorts, a massive network of pro-Kremlin influencers around the world, and then all the covert tactics that we came to associate in 2016 with Brexit and the US presidential elections in the West, because this has been going on, of course, in Russia's sphere of influence for much, much, much longer. But the botnets, the cyborg nets, the troll farms, and of course, all the hacking that we've seen. And that power, you asked the end game. The end game is really to undermine the liberal world order and the liberal democracies that underpin it. It is to undermine the very concept of truth and a shared reality. And in the context of this war, it has laid the foundations for a domestic audience and for a Russian audience in Ukraine and elsewhere.
Domestic audience in Russia, you mean?
In Russia, for this conflict, providing reasons for this conflict, telling the people that this is about saving the people of Ukraine from a Nazi regime, saving Russians from attack within the country.
That's all we have time for this evening. So it just remains for me to say thank you to our panellists here in the studio, Bill Browder, Sophia Gaston, Alistair Burt, Sasha Havlicek. Of course, it's you at home at the centre of this conversation. If you'd like to be part of the programme next time, get in touch by emailing thegreatdebate@sky.uk. And for now, thank you, as always, to The Wall, to our viewers panel. Very thoughtful contributions tonight, and especially thank you to those from a Russian and Ukrainian background. For you at home, keep talking, and we'll see you again at the same time next week for The Great Debate.